So check it out. I'm really excited about this. We're very fortunate to have Sam Hollander, who is one of the industry's most prolific and influential songwriters of probably the last 10, 15 years. He's amazing. He's a good dude. And he's gracious enough to do this for us. So I'm going to read his bio really quick and then play a couple little snippets of some songs he's written, and then we'll get started. So make sure you guys mute your microphones, and here we go. As one of the most renowned songwriters and producers in the game, Sam Hollander has had multi-platinum success writing and producing for the likes of Panic at the Disco, Fits in the Tantrums, Weezer, Katy Perry, Train, One Direction, Daughtry, Pentatonix, and Gym Class Heroes, amongst many others. To date, he's had 22 U.S. Top 40 hits, as well as being named Rolling Stone Magazine's Hot List Producer of the Year. His songs have been streamed over 4 billion times, and in 2019, he held the #1 position on the Billboard Rock Songwriters chart for 9 weeks, year-end record. Also been chosen to be on Variety's Hitmakers list for 2019. Hollander's 2-decade-strong career has recently hit new heights from collaborations with Fits in the Tantrums, multi-platinum worldwide smash hit Hand Clap, 1 billion streams, and 8 songs he co-penned on Panic at the Disco's Billboard 200 #1 album Pray for the Wicked, including the 4 times platinum, record-breaking global hit High Hopes and Hey Look Ma, I Made It, which replaced High Hopes at #1 on the Rock Songs chart. Other notable recent successes include co-writing Blink-182's alternative top 10 single Blame It on My Youth, James T.W.'s worldwide hit When You Love Someone, and writing and producing 2 songs on the legendary Ringo Starr's recent release, What's My Name. My career has always been defined by musical shape-shifting, he says. As an oddball who grew up equally digging Earth, Wind and Fire, Bruce Springsteen, and Husker Du records, I never really had any concept of genres whatsoever. I'm still a K-Tel kid at heart. The song has always been king. Hollander's career began when he collaborated with Carole King on her critically acclaimed Love Makes the World record. This co-writes with industry legends like Paul Williams, Nile Rodgers, Cyndi Lauper, and Donna Summer. As a college dropout, this was truly the zenith of my higher education. I learned how to write from the math. I still can't believe they didn't throw me out of the room. Within a few years, he achieved his first platinum successes with Gym Class Heroes, Cupid's Chokehold, which went #1 at Top 40 Radio, Metro Station Shit It, Boys Like Girls, Greatest Hits, Love Drunk, and We the Kings, Check Yes Juliet, Daughtry, Waiting for Superman, Train, Save Me San Francisco, and Marry Me, among others. These triumphs led to work on the 2nd season of NBC's Steven Spielberg-helmed series Smash, which included the Emmy-nominated Voice in a Dream. In 2016, NBC brought Hollander back to write a Thursday night football theme based on his hit song with the Pentatonix. He is currently signed to Sony ATV Publishing. So that's a pretty
It's a lot of comprehensive content there, LVO.
there's a lot of content, and I'm going to do something else really quick here. I'm going to share my screen. And hold on. Yeah.
That is so dope.
And as you can see, these are all a bunch of songs that he has had a hand in writing and has worked on. And here's a little taste that he's written.
Waiting, had to have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars, but I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living, didn't know how. No, I can make your hands clap. Said I can make your hands clap. Somebody sing your song 'cause you've been sinning in the city. I know too many troubles, all these lovers. I'll be praying for the thick lesson if you lose. Boo-hoo. Hey, look, Ma, I made it. Hey, look, Ma, I made it.
All right, you guys get the idea. Ladies and gentlemen, Sam Hollander.
Hey, that was really, it was like a walk down a very strange memory lane. Thank you, my friend. How you guys doing? Is it cold up there? Y'all look very cold.
Yep.
Always cold.
I'm a New Yorker. I represent. Right now I am not representing, but I'm there in spirit with you. It's warm here. It's like 92 degrees here. It's like weird. It's just strange.
You're in LA, right?
I'm in LA, and I have zero complaints about that today. But yes, I am from Mount Kisco, New York, for anybody who is familiar with the 914. And yeah, so I see all your faces. Y'all look super cold, just chilly, like a frozen looking bunch. I don't like any of this. I'm sorry. You guys still there?
Yeah.
Did the dream die? Hey, okay, good. So LVO is my boy, and we first met during the Daughtry sessions, and I just want to say I was very stoked to do this because when I was 17, I was a senior at Fox Lane High School in Mount Kisco. I skipped out of school on a Wednesday, and I drove with a friend who was an MC, and we drove to Manhattan to go to New York Public Library to see Hall and Oates, Tommy Mottola, Alan Grubman, the attorney, and Walter Yetnikoff from Sony Records back then to go they gave a free speech how to get into the music business, you know, and I learned more that day than I learned in 4 years of high school. So I really believe in music education. I believe in it, especially in intimate settings like this. And when you're dealing with a cat like LVO, who's a real guy, who's really in the mix, who's written songs on real records, it's great because you just, I don't know, it's like it's an interesting access, and I think it's awesome. So I'm so stoked you guys are here, and I hope you will hit me with lots of crazy questions, and I will answer every single one.
That's awesome. I did have them come up with questions, so hopefully they have a few. So.
All right,
Start
I'll
with
take
whatever
anything,
you
man.
got.
Go.
What's that?
Just bring it. Just bring it.
Bring it. I got one
Let's
for you.
go.
Right out of the gate.
Okay. All right.
What's the one bit of advice or something you've learned as a songwriter that you wish you could have told your 14-year-old self?
Oh, I refuse to answer that question. My 14-year-old self. Here's the thing. At 14, I guess that it was possible. You know, you believe when you're young and you're looking and you're viewing this from afar, it all feels impenetrable to some extent. So I remember at 14 listening to records, and they might have been bands or artists who were only like 5, 6, 7 years older than me, but they felt a world away, a universe away. And I wish I could have told myself that you're better than you think you are, and you'll get there. And you know what? You're never as far removed from it as you think. Anything is accessible if you put the work in. So I wish I'd done that. I also would tell myself not to play high school football, because honestly, I was a pretty terrible football player, and I wasted a lot of time getting my head kicked in when I really could have done other things with my time. You know, I sang in a band in high school, but I tried lots of things. I was very experimental in my choices academically, and football was one of them. And I would say, like, if I could do it again, I probably don't get my head kicked in.
That's awesome.
Fair?
Fair. Very fair. Who else has questions?
I would also, well, I would say one other thing about, I just want to add one thing. The other thing I would say is write everything down, you know. Writing is about process, and writing is a muscle, and you have to constantly engage it. So if at 14, I used to keep these scrapbooks and journals, and I was pretty prolific, and I wrote all this stuff. And I would say there were times where I would really hit a zone. I'd write some stuff that, you know, it was catharsis, right? So I was working out stuff inside of me that I wanted to put down on paper. But then I would hit a wall with it, and I wouldn't muscle through it. I would then stop for 2-3 months at a time. And what I've learned since is you use the word prolific. I think prolific is as an artist, I think it's great. I think you just always just put it out there. Just keep putting stuff out there until it begins to manifest, and, you know.
We
a
have
way that works for you.
this tool that we have here is amazing. I mean, mine's full
Yeah.
of voice memos and ideas, and just they're the little snippets that mean nothing to anybody but me, but they can end up songs. So,
I mean, I walk around, my process, I always say this, 10 years ago, I went to dinner with a couple of friends, and one of the guys was a pro basketball player, and he was coming off this guy Steve Nash, and he was at the end of his career, but he's a Hall of Fame player, and we're talking about process because he was at that point probably 38, and he was playing basketball against kids who were just out of high school who were significantly quicker, and this guy was still dominating in the league. And what he said to me, he said, I asked him, I said, how do you how do you get up every morning and still want to do this, And he said, he was in his third year in the NBA, and his numbers as a basketball player were beginning to plummet. And he went to see a sports psychologist. And the guy told him, look, it's but 3 years into the league, you've kind of done everything. You've been to Milwaukee at this point 7 times. You've been to every single city. The novelty of everything is worn off. And that's when most athletes start to fall apart. And he said he recommended that he try all these sort of different disciplines. He's yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi. He went down this list, and the most important thing was he said, you're never going to take a day off during the season, right? So when you wake up in the morning on your day off, you're going to train one of these things. You're always going to alter your process, but you're going to try something. You're going to jolt it to keep you stimulated. And what happened was, he said, I did that, and I suddenly realized that I was the only person training on my off days consistently, and my numbers just went back, shot through the roof. I left that dinner and I went home and I thought about where I was at, and I was coming off a really great stretch of a bunch of those songs, sort of ones that you mentioned earlier on, were all hitting simultaneously. And at that point, I was overworking, so I would take days off. I take long extended breaks whenever I was between records. And I decided to apply that same philosophy to writing. So during the season, which for me is basically a September to May, I write every day. Every day. I write a verse, a pre, a chorus, sometimes all of them. And what that does is I get up in the mornings, the first thing I do before I drop my daughter off at school. But I would say, I feel like I'm a step quicker. I feel like I get in the room with somebody that afternoon, because I'm a collaborator, right? Like, you look at my credits and I write these with the artists, and I feel like I walk in a room and I'm able to access things really quickly. And I think it's super important when you're a co-writer. You really want to come in with an intense focus, and you really when you're co-writing with people, and specifically co-writing with artists, you're envisioning you're directing the movie of how you'd like to see it as a fan. So like when I worked with Daughtry and LVO and we wrote Waiting for Superman, that song started with an idea because I knew that, I felt like I had a handle on Daughtry's persona, and I knew that he loved comics and superheroes and stuff like that. And I figured, okay, this is something that he could connect to as a character. And we started from there. And that's what I do. So I do tons before I collaborate with people. I do tons of due diligence, and I'm writing every morning before we go in the room, and I'm hip pocketing ideas. So when I walk into a room with somebody, I have like an idea that I'm pretty excited about. And then the hardest job is to sell it through. And that's when you become a salesperson, and you got to really get amped up, and you're really just pitching your idea. And I fight for my ideas because I put a lot of thought in them.
that's cool.
That's, by the way, that is what ADHD you just saw. Like, I just took you guys on a journey, and that's how my brain works. But eventually I land the plane. It's like, it just sometimes does this. Just stick with me. I'll always get it there.
Oh, that was great, though. It's honestly the same approach that I take when submitting songs for Chris, and I'm in the band. Like, I know
Yeah.
Chris. You got to get in his head. What is he interested in? And then once you have an idea you feel good about, like you said, you're selling it to him. And
That's right. That's right.
who else has questions for Sam Hollander?
So I got a question.
Okay.
And so I don't really know if it's like songwriting like per se, but like what do you think is the best way to get songs like out there, like so people are listening to it and like kind of spread it around?
As an artist or a writer?
I guess both. I mean, if you're an artist or a writer.
So Cooper, just so you know, Sam, Cooper just released. just did your first record, right?
Yep.
How many songs?
There's about like 7 or 8.
7 or 8 songs. So he's
Mm.
Congrats, man.
Oh, thanks.
really good. Really
That's
good.
awesome, dude. I mean, I think, unfortunately, I think we're social media, et cetera, sort of dictate how records work at this point, and that's just the truth of it. And you know, I never want to sound like the old guy in the room, right? You know, I never want to be that guy, so I'm not going to be that guy. So I would say right now, if I were to tell you what, like, if you're looking for both fans and record labels, et cetera, or just, you know, it's going to be TikTok or YouTube, because and you know, maybe Snapchat to some extent. That's what I think, you know, the kids, that's where people are tuned into. That's where things get discovered overnight. You know, the traditional ways of breaking records are out the window. It's absolute anarchy right now. And look at the world right now. I mean, the world is anarchy as it is. These are crazy times. So what I would say is, with your music as a songwriter or an artist, you have to apply a punk rock DIY philosophy to everything. I think you just have to think, okay, this is the playing field. This is what I have to exist in. So how am I going to stick out in that playing field? And that's about creativity. And I do believe the biggest hustler always wins. So, you know, it's about really just creatively finding your audience and growing your audience. I mean, it's, you know, like there are overnight stories every night, right? On TikTok, there's some kid who blows up every single night and some label gets. But you know what? If you can really build a core that grows with you, like, you know, I watched, like, Shawn Mendes did an incredible job on Vine and transcending out of Vine, you know, and becoming a real artist. And what's interesting about it is the way he built it up was this really gradual build, but he took kids with him. And that's what you want to do, is you just want to, like, every day, man, make 2 fans into 4, 4 into 8. It's just continually to build a community around your art, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
If that makes sense. You can do it.
Who
And
else?
congrats again, Cooper.
I got a question.
Hi.
Hi. So, what's your favorite song that you've written, and what was your inspiration for writing it?
Wow. It's crazy. Geez, you know, I always change my opinion on my favorite song. Just kind of bullshit, I know, but I just always, I'm not very consistent with it. I I would say, gosh, I'm emotionally, there's a resonance to all of them in some way, shape, or form, because they're all snapshots of where I was at my life at that point, you know? I've always felt in some weird way my favorite song is probably a song I did with a band called We the Kings called Check Yes Juliet. The reason I love this song is we found these guys in Florida, this band, and they were called DeSoto. And they were kind of like a screamo band. This is 2006. And they came up to New York to work with us, with me and my partner Dave Katz at the time. And we said, look, you know, we're going to take this in a musical direction. We're going to take this to a different place. We had just done Boys Like Girls, and we had a big hit with The Great Escape and Gym Class Heroes, and like these things were working. And I kind of wanted to take this band to a similar space. They were really into it. And we said to them, look, you can't be DeSoto. And they said, we want to be DeSoto. I said, you can't be DeSoto. So I went to MySpace, which was the thing at the time. And there were 287 bands with pages called DeSoto. So that was enough to talk them out of DeSoto, right? So we said, look, you need a name, and you need a name that's gonna resonate and that you're gonna connect to, you know? So I tortured them with the names. Like, if I'm involved in the name process with a band, like, we're gonna beat this into the ground until it's something that actually connects, because your name is your t-shirt, right? It's your merch, it's your brand, it's everything. So it has to actually grab, you know? So it's Christmas time. I'm walking down Broadway. It's like idyllic. I think it's like snowing. I'm in Manhattan. It's like just a great day. And my phone starts blowing up with the guitar player, Hunter Thompson, this kid in the band. And it's blowing up. And he's like, look, man, we respect you. We love what you've done for us. But we've come up with a name that we think is the name of our band, and you have to approve it because we believe in it. I said, what's the name? He said, Check Yes Juliet. And I don't know what happened to my beautiful like winter day, but it suddenly got really gray out. And I just start teeing off on this guy in a text. I was like, your band name is not Check Yes Juliet. It will never be Check Yes Juliet. I keep saying it in the way that Trump says China. I keep saying Check Yes Juliet, Check Yes Juliet, Check Yes Juliet, you know? And it's making me crazy. I was like, who wants a band name Check Yes Juliet? And so we get to the end of this thing. A couple weeks later, we get We the Kings. We get this great name. And we have the album, and we made the album ourselves, no record label. We decided we were just going to finish albums, sell a finished album, because I hate label interference, you know? And so me, Dave, and Travis write this record. We have one final song. These guys came up with this great melody. The verse A section's great. It's like da 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 da, you know? And I'm walking to get a coffee, and I'm standing online. It's cold, it's raw. And I just start singing, Check Yes Julia, are you with me? Rain is falling down. And it suddenly connects. And I ran back with coffee spilled all over my shirt. I'm like, Check Yes Julia, it's a song. It's not a band. It's a song. And it was a big hit. It was a platinum record. And, you know, I still see these guys do it to a couple thousand people a night 15, 14 years later. And so that, for some reason, I don't know, there's something about that story that still, that one I connected the most, you know?
It's a great story. That's awesome.
Thanks, Sierra.
Who else
I
has
have
a question?
I have a question. My question is, have you ever worked with an up-and-coming artist? And if so, is that different from working with them than working with an established artist?
That's a great question. I have, you know, in those cases, I used to try to develop an act or two a year and counterbalance it with working with established acts. I do it less now, but I still, you know, once a year, twice a year, I'll write with somebody who I've identified who I think has a thing that works with my thing, and I enjoy it. It's a completely different dynamic. And I'll go a step further. It's actually a different dynamic in terms of also where an artist is at in their career. What I mean by that is, if I'm writing with an artist on their first record, they probably are guarded, but at the same time, they're open, right? If that first record hits and they come back, they hate being in a room with me. They resent every minute of it. They want to be making their own record on their second record. If that record flops, they come back on the third record and they're more open than they've ever been. And it, you know, it's the same with like when you're working with a new artist. You either get a kid who's super headstrong, who really has an identity of what they want to do, and we chase that, or you have a kid who really is coming to work with you because they understand what you do, and they want to, you know, they want that, whatever that fairy dust is on their thing, you know what I mean? So yeah. It's so based on the personality, but I would tell you, it keeps you on your toes. I never can get comfortable or complacent for a second, because just when I think I've dialed it in and I really know how to navigate this, you know, as my role is partially therapist, right? Because they're artists, and artists are crazy, as you guys all know. So when you're dealing with them, you know, it's such a fine dance, and you know, you have to have laser focus on it, because every personality is different. If that helps.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Next.
I got one.
Who just said that?
Me.
Oh, go ahead.
Hey.
Hey. So
Hey, Nate.
my question is, like, how do you approach someone that's more established in the music business without seeming pushy and annoying?
That's a great question. I've done it, you know. I'm pretty nerdy. So what I would say about that is, I've always approached everything like an outsider. I've never had a moment where I felt like I was inside the machine. I play outside of the machine. I've always done things on my terms. I don't really follow any rules. And so that's the same way that I approach artists, in terms of, I approach it like this weird, I don't approach it like a businessy guy. I approach it like a fan, you know? So it doesn't matter who the artist is. If there's somebody I want to work with, even if they're not aware of me or I'm not on their radar per se. I approach it like a fan. So I I've done so much due diligence on them, right? So when I'm fighting to work with somebody, I will write an essay of why I feel like I'm the person to do it, because I understand, I know this, I studied this, I know the deep cuts, I know why this worked, I know why this worked. It's about passion. I still think we all believe in passion, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I just approach someone and say, hey, what about me? Eh, you know, you have to come at it. Like, if you're writing with someone who at that point is above your pay grade, you gotta really approach them with like heart. And what you have to realize is this business still exists in heart. At the end of the day, this business is akin to your high school smoking section. It's a bunch of kids standing outside smoking cigarettes in the cold. We don't do that, by the way, but you get the idea. It's like, these are misfits. It's a bunch of, like, look at you guys. You're all misfits to some extent. Like, we all don't completely fit in. We're all a little broken. I mean, that's why we do this. So you have to just sort of know that, like, it's about heart, and we take to heart. And I think most artists do. And anyone I've ever approached, like when I first met Carole King, I wrote lyric with Carole King for a year or so. And when I first met Carole King, I mean, you're talking about the greatest living female songwriter of all time, if not the greatest songwriter. I mean, I'll put her up against anybody, right? And at the end of the day, I'm a kid who had like released a couple of hip hop records, you know, and but I knew her catalog intimately, and I knew the Brill Building writing from the '60s intimately, and I understood her story, and I knew the Laurel Canyon part of it, and I knew it. So when I met her, I think she was so blown away by the passion that I had for her writing that she was willing to take a flyer and throw down with me, and I brought it. You'll get that chance with somebody, and then the biggest thing is you got to bring it, and that's the
Yeah.
thing.
Absolutely. Hey, can you tell us about because I mean, I can't imagine being in a room with somebody like this, and you had the opportunity to, and you obviously came at it as a fan, but you had an opportunity to work with one of the original Beatles, Ringo.
Yeah, yeah, it's cool. It's funny. I worked with Mike Love from the Beach Boys, right? And the man who put me in touch with Mike Love, I've done a couple of records of Mike, and who I adore. And this man named Winston Simone, he's sort of like a dream weaver, just like a guy who just like, I think he was a fan of my writing and just so supportive of it. And he said to me, I was talking to Ringo's manager, and Ringo's been making records with the same cats for 20 years. Joe Walsh, Steve Lukather from Toto, Colin Hay from Men at Work. They have an inner circle, and it's impenetrable, impenetrable. And he said, they really Ringo would really be open to switching it up and trying somebody new. He wanted a recommendation. I said, well, my friend Sam Hollander right now, he's the #1 rock writer on Billboard this year, whatever. Ringo was willing to meet. And when I went into Ringo, it was funny, you know, you, you know, these guys are tough, man. They're like, these guys are these are serious cats, and they don't suffer fools. And so I knew to come in there with a song, and I had already worked through it. And I basically gave him my pitch, and I told him why I thought it would work. And then I sang it in front of him. And he looked at me and said, oh, pretty good, man. Pretty good, pretty good, pretty good, pretty good. So you want me to just like sing your song? I said, well, there's no second verse. He said, oh, interesting. And then he wrote the second verse, and we cut a song. And next thing you know, Ringo's like playing drums in front of me, and I'm cutting it, I'm producing it. Surreal, man. And then I gave him another one. And it was, the one thing I would say is I'm not intimidated by anybody. And I think that's the biggest lesson in music, and as a songwriter, it's the hardest thing to get over. And once I got over that, it puts me in an incredible position. Nobody can throw me. So I've worked with the Beatles, I've worked with the Beach Boys, I've worked with Carole King, I've worked with the OJs, I've worked with, One Direction, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter who it is. I'm not thrown when I walk into a room, because all I do is care about the song. The song is all that I care about. None of the other bullshit. Like, I just want the song. I hope they like me, and I hope they respect me, and I'm super respectful, and I really try to approach it like as graciously and sort of, I'm so grateful for any experience that I get. But at the same time, I want the song to be great. And I think people know that when they work with me, I'm going to beat this thing into the ground till it's right, you know? And, you know, I put my heart into it, and I hope that, you know, that resonates, you know?
That's the first thing I noticed about you when I met you in the studio, was that, you know, in this game, I think you'll agree with me, there's a lot of not so genuine people and arrogant, and just, you know, you can feel like, you know, like the underdog in a room like that. But you came at it very gracious, very team player. What can we do to make this song great? And you didn't come off like a know-it-all or anything like that. And I think, you know, that's cool.
Look, dude, I like people. You know what I mean? I like people. I don't really like being by myself. You know, I don't really like being alone with myself. So I like, you know, I like being in a room with people and creating art. And I have, it's the joke is not lost on me that somehow I got lucky and I put the work in and I put the hours in and I mastered my craft. And you know what? I still got really lucky. So that's not lost on me. So I'm very genuinely blessed and grateful to be in these situations, and I don't take it lightly. And I believe anybody who I create with, it doesn't matter if they're brand new and they just you know, we got paired up because something big's happening with them and it's a thing and they're sort of just figuring it out, or somebody who's Ringo, who's been doing it, you know, beyond my lifetime. And, you know, I treat them all with the same level of respect. It's like, we're all just making art, and I just want people to, I don't know, I just want to write something that like resonates for all of us, you know, something that like we all can leave the room and say, wow, we really brought it today. And maybe it'll live on, you know, past the day.
Who's got questions?
Bring it.
I have
Will. Will's got one.
Um,
Will, I see Will. I see. Here you go. Go, Will. All right.
So
You
I
know,
listen to a
Will,
lot
you
of,
know,
like,
Will, you know why I called you out?
what?
It's your lighting. Your lighting is at
Oh
another
yeah,
level from
these.
everybody else's lighting. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like what you're
Thank
Oh,
you.
snap.
Yeah.
All right, go.
Thanks. All right. So yeah. So I listen to a lot of like post-punk and noise rock bands like Interpol, Sonic Youth, and like even like Drive Like Jehu or Blood Brothers, if you know them. And like a lot of their guitar parts or even like parts of other instruments aren't necessarily remarkable like by themselves or like in a vacuum. And I'm sure like a ton of us are multi-instrumentalists and stuff like that. But could you speak on maybe writing, especially guitar parts, without kind of hearing the other parts in your head, or how to hear the other parts in your head, kind of like how to assemble it all together? Because like you might write
Well,
something.
the only
and
thing I
think
would say, hard for me, I write lyric and melody, so I'm not a guitar
Mhm.
player other than I can strum a few chords.
Okay, well,
But
but
what I
even
would
like,
say is
yeah,
this: if you were collaborating with a top liner or somebody writes the lyric and melody, the one thing I would say is it's very hard for someone to write over riffs in general. You know,
mhm.
it is so much better to dress something up after the song is completed. You know, I remember working with Coheed and Cambria, and Claudio is just shredding. He's shredding. And he's like, hey, let's write over this. It's like, you know,
Mm.
it's so much information is taken. And the
Right, yeah.
problem is for us, then it becomes this little, like we're trying to carve out the spaces to find the spaces and the holes to do our thing. So what I would say is when you're writing with somebody, no matter how noise pop it is, I mean, if you're doing a Sonic Youth thing, et cetera, or My Bloody Valentine, anything that's just sort of,
Mhm.
you know, super noisy and sort of artful in that way, if you're
Right.
collaborating with someone on the other end of it, just write basic chordal stuff at first to give them that structure, and then take that a cappella and go crazy, you know?
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Next.
I have a question.
Hey, man.
So I'm wondering, like, obviously everyone has their own opinion and like but like as a songwriter, when you listen to a different songwriter, like what do you listen for in terms of like how you think about like how good or not good they are? And along with that, like as someone who's probably studied songwriting for their whole life, who do you think is like the pinnacle songwriter?
Oh, that's great. Interesting. That's tricky. It's really tricky. There's so many writers I like for different reasons, but there's so many writers who dialed in eras, first of all, right? So there's every era of music, there have been writers who just blew me away. Um, you know, before I was born, there are people like Burt Bacharach, right? People like Carole King, Jerry Goff, and all the Brill Building writers because they're traditionalists. And I love that the music was both pop and soul. In the 70s, as a little kid, I was a big fan of Gamble and Huff from Philadelphia International, because they were doing this soul music, but it had these interesting jazz chords. So it was very warm feeling to me. I love the Bee Gees. I love Barry Gibb's writing, because Barry Gibb's writing I love writers who have a voice that it just, when their stuff comes on, I can hear it either lyrically or melodically. And to answer the first part of your question, that goes back to, like, I'll listen to new Music Friday every other week, and I check it out. And sure, there are things that I can, say snarky comments about for this reason or that reason. But what I would say is, what I've learned about writing is, writers can be great at their thing. Their thing doesn't have to be my thing, right? So there are writers who really have their thing dialed in, and I respect it. I can hear something that I call hack, where I feel like somebody's just sleepwalking through it. I listen for lyric first, right? I work title out. Since I write titles, I begin my songs based on a title. I start with a title, and then I figure out what the movie is going to be around the title. So, so if a title is lazy, if someone sends me a song right now called Hello, I'm not going to take it that seriously.
Yeah.
Because Adele can get away with that song, but the rest of us can't. So I like songs that push buttons in concept. And that's the first thing. Then I listen to the melodies, and I think, are the melodies relevant in terms of, can they actually work in this day and age? Because melodies, and I'm talking, by the way, I'm talking about pop music writing or rock, but I'm not talking about, Nashville, which is a whole other set of rules. But let's just talk about pop and rock. Like, both of those kind of had rules of why records work, and they're seminal records every year that push the writing, and that you sort of have to be aware of, even if you're not a big fan, right? Like, I remember, if you look at alternative music over the last 10 years, MGMT, Passion Pit, Imagine Dragons big time, 21 Pilots big time, then Panic, Walk the Moon, the first single. I mean, these things, they're all songs that change the culture. So when songs have to sort of follow some of the metrics of it for radio, if you're looking for something to be big on radio, they sort of have to at least play within the same very broad zip code. So I do listen to that. If something's so far out that it's on like this other plane, I go, that's awesome, but might not be my thing. It might be too broad. I'm a kid who grew up on radio. So for me, radio was king, right? Like, I grew up, and like, my local radio station in New York was everything to me, So I still believe in whatever radio is at this point. I love Sirius, man. And like, Sirius is bumping in my car all day long. And I know why kind of things work at radio. And then there's this strange song, Billie Eilish comes out, right? And, the Billie Eilish song comes out and blows up. And when you hear Bad Guy for the first time, I mean, the production's so strange. It's so primal and raw, and her vocals and everything about it is just like, it's put together in such a strange fashion, but it completely changes the paradigm. So now every song you hear sounds like Billie Eilish, right? You have bands trying to do Billie Eilish, and everybody's trying to do Billie Eilish. That's what happens when music people chase things when it works. So I listen for all of that, but the number one thing I would say is, it's lyrically driven for me at any format. Doesn't matter what it is. If the lyric grabs me, then I'm already in, and I'm already impressed, and I'm looking at the writer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. We drifted, but we came back. We landed the plane.
Next question.
So,
I get.
sorry, you can go ahead. Oh, thanks. Um, so I was wondering, when it comes to like a song, High Hopes, where you ever even people, do you find,
Wait, say what's more? I'm losing you.
Michael, you're
I heard
interrupting.
High
oh,
Hopes. I did hear. I heard High Hopes though.
so yeah, when you're writing a song such like that with like five or even six other writers, do you find it more difficult or do you find it easier to write a large?
Well, I'll tell you how High Hopes was written because it's a really interesting story. Um, Four writers, super legit, like really good writers, like a bunch of LA cats. They all were at a writing camp. Do you guys know what a writing camp is? Have you heard that term? In pop music, they do these things called writing camps now, where they basically, once a publisher or an ASCAP or a BMI, a performing rights organization identifies a writer, they will send them off to a destination and they do these trips. It's really for younger writers, but they're exotic, right? There's one in Bali, there's one in France, there's one, Miami Beach. There's these things, writing on a yacht. And it's all this cool thing. It's one of the things that makes music fun as a kid. You're like, wait, I get sent off to like go write for a week with like a bunch of people my age and party and write songs. Sounds great. The idea is they're sort of vetting the writer and the publishers are sort of vetting the writer. They're not really expecting anything legendary or groundbreaking to come out of it, but they're really trying to get a sense and see how the writer, what the market research is on the writer, right? Because the other writers all talk, the other publishers all talk, and they say, oh, everyone was talking about your writer. They said he was amazing, blah, blah, blah. That song begins in a writing camp in Colorado in 2015. 5 years ago, four writers have been, I want to say, skiing all day, and they all end up in a hot tub talking. And one of them starts singing that chorus, and the other adds a line, and then two of them go off and make a little track to it, right? And they send it into their management, all of them, and my best friend Jonathan Daniel, who owns Crush Management, gets it, and he manages Panic. Look up Crush Management. They're really the best management company in the world. And Sia, Fall Out Boy, Train, Alec Benjamin. But he gets this chorus, and it's 2015. He said, man, that's a great chorus. So he's trying to figure out who could cut it, and no one wants it. So they send it over to a bunch of rappers. Every rapper passes on it, and it sits, right? At the same time, 2017, Brendan and Jake Sinclair and one of the other writers write an interpolation of a Beach Boys song, I believe Fun, 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 they were going to interpolate, where they're going to take the chorus of Fun, Fun, Fun from the Beach Boys and add new verses, right? And they write this verse. And JD and Evan Tabenfeld, who's the A&R guy with him, they heard, oh, that verse is not the verse, sorry, the pre-chorus. The pre-chorus is awesome. Because mama said, don't give up, it's a little complicated, And then it went, all tied up, no more love, I hate to see you waiting. Gonna have fun, till I dead, went to the Beach Boys, right? But they said this little pre-chorus is really cool. So they have a pre-chorus they like, and they have a chorus they like, and the song sits for another year. At that point, I'd written probably 8 or 9 songs of Brendan for this record, towards this record, and 4 or 5 on the last. And we've been spending a lot of time together. And I kept petitioning. I was like, man, that High Hopes chorus is sick. Let me write verses. And nobody involved would let me write the verses. And no, it's fine, because honestly, it was like no one could figure it out. It was just like a puzzle that was sitting there. But the record was almost done. And one day, JD called me. He said, you know what, man? If you have verses for High Hopes, just spit them. So I ran over to Jake's house, met up with Jake and Brendan, and I sang them something, and then Brendan tweaked it. And it was Mama said, fulfill the philosophy, be something greater, go make a fantasy, manifest as and that's how that song comes together. So it's strange because it's literally a Frankenstein project. It's the least organic songwriting in the world. And it worked. Normally that would never work, but it worked. So I don't know. I mean, we didn't, trust me, I met 2 of these people at an award show. I was like, oh, you wrote the song with me. nice to meet you, you know? So it wasn't an organic process, but, you know, I still emotionally am so connected to it because those verses are my words and they speak to where my head was at. And just, you know, it was a fire drill and I hit it. So I'm really proud of it, you know?
That's awesome. Going back to the writing camps that you were talking about, so we have a pretty famous songwriter from Rochester. You probably know him, John Ryan. Um,
I have collaborated with young John.
so John, have you guys heard of John Ryan? He went to McQuaid. He's a songwriter, lives in LA now, and he was at a writers camp. And I guess they were all talking about that old 60s song, I think it's 60s or 50s, with the saxophone, Tequila.
And he did Fireball.
So they wrote Fireball in one of those writer rounds.
Fireball.
We all know what happened then. That's on
John Ryan, by the way, is a really good writer. He's a writer. One thing that works great for John Ryan is he can play his face off. He's a good piano player. Like, he's musical, but his voice is fierce. And look, I can't sing, as you can hear. Like, I mean, I just sort of mumble out my melodies until they're right. But if you can really sing, you have a great advantage. John Ryan, when he sits down, he sings better than the artist. So everyone's like, oh, that sounds really good. Sounds good when you sing it. It's almost like a curse because then it gets cut. And of course, it's never as good as his demo. And everyone has the demoitis because his voice is so fierce, you know?
Yeah, that's cool. Chris and I wrote a country song with Richard Marx. And the problem is Chris sang the demo. So that's pretty intimidating because Chris stands out like a sore thumb.
There are certain singers. Chris is like, I've worked with a bunch of singers that I think have those voices. Pat Monahan is my number one. Daughtry's number two. Gavin DeGraw has that voice. I've been working with Jewel. I did her new single, and they all have a thing when they get on the mic. No one will do better than what they did. Like, if that song is heard by somebody else, they won't even attempt it because you're just dealing with singers at such a different level.
Anybody else got questions?
I have a question.
Melissa.
Hey, Sam.
Hey, Melissa.
I'm one of the coaches at Camp Rockstar, and I'm working with a bunch of young songwriters. So
Hi.
I have a question for either getting an idea started or if a young songwriter is having like writer's block. What are some tools that you use that maybe they could apply to like keep the momentum going or like to get excited again about an old idea?
Great question.
Okay. Well, writer's block to me is born out of you hit a wall and then you get frustrated and you stop, right? And so if you never stop, it's hard to have writer's block, right? So the number one thing I would say, kids, is journal every day. Journal something. And listen to things around you. I have picked up lyrics from conversations on the C train in Manhattan. I have picked up lyrics from movies. I'm into documentaries. I watch a documentary every single night. And whenever there's like a buzzword that I hear and I think, wow, that's a really interesting word. And I just write it down. Write down conversations with friends, any of it. There's so much to mine in life. You know, you can mine all this stuff that's out there and you wouldn't believe, like if you actually keep your ears open, and you don't notice this, but I have tremendously big ears. Like my ears are Spock-like. So if you have that ability, you will hear all these voices that are talking to you, and it's out there. I'll be in a bookstore and I'll just go to a rack and look at all the titles of books. And then maybe I'll grab a title and I'll think maybe that could be a cool song. Or maybe I'll take one word from one title and one word from another title and pair them. And I just, I think the key to the whole thing is just think outside the box with it. And if anything sounds generic, don't do it. Think crazy. It's the number one thing I think with writing. You have to think crazy. Like, don't ever rein yourself in terms of lyrically and melodically, like certainly lyrically. Like, think outside the box, man. Like, I'm looking around my yard right now. I'm looking at my pool. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, there's a thing. There's a pool thing here. Like, oh, there's a, pool floats. Hey, I'm going to write the song Pool Floats. And I'll figure out what pool floats is. And maybe it's boat drinks and pool floats, just like you start to piece together words and ideas that work together and then you just chase it. That's the thing. Never. But the biggest thing is writer's block to me engulfs me when I quit. And if I never quit, I'm always come back. The other thing I would say is, if for some reason you hit that wall and you're young and you're writing and you can't get out of it, then take a break. Like if for some reason you've tried for 4 days, right? And you're not getting anything, you're just putting down paper and nothing's working and you're getting frustrated, step away from the podium, regroup, completely do something else, and do not think about music. Don't listen to music. Don't think about music. Go do something mindless. It'll come back to you because it's what your passion is. And if it's your passion, you start to hear it. And it just like, as we know, I can't explain to you how these things happen. I can't explain to you. I'm walking down the street. I'm in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. I'm walking down the street and I'm in downtown Chatham and I'm walking around. And out of nowhere, I literally said, I can make your hands clap. I can make your hands clap. And I didn't know what that was. I don't even know what it meant. But it felt it felt right to me. I was like, this feels fun. I don't know what it is, but it just feels fun.
I'd say
it worked. Some days it works. Some days I'm terrible. Some days I write things that are so whack that, you guys would all shut your Zooms off at once. But, just keep going. And the other thing I would say that is so imperative, I don't want to forget this, is dare to suck. It's so important to say that. Dare to suck. Do not be afraid. And when you're collaborating with people, do not be afraid to getting in a room with people and saying some crazy stuff. Do not be afraid. Never have to feel like you're going to be judged, because at least you're saying something. I would like to believe with any writer who I've ever worked with, if you line up 100 writers in in a room, and I went down a list and I collaborated with each of them, I'm hoping that there's one discernible trait about each of them that I could name. I could say, oh, that person, badass lyrically. That person, great track. That person, their perspective's really interesting. I remember I met a writer named J.T. Harding about 12 years ago, who we ended up actually publishing, and which was incredible. And he had 3 country #1s. He wrote Uncle Cracker Smile, Jake Owen, Kenny Chesney, incredible writer. What I realized is his thing was he loved 80s rock references and songs. And he'd always throw these like punchline-y sort of things. And so out of nowhere, it'd be like, she's like Def Leppard, pour some sugar on me. She's like, and he's always like doing this self-referential 80s stuff. But it was a thing. I thought, man, that's really rad. That's his heart. He just wants to like name drop these things and make them work with this punchline cut Nashville stuff. And it's brilliant. And I watched this guy have hit after hit after hit. And it was so real, because when you talk to this guy, that's actually his conversation pattern. Like you'll talk to him, he's like, oh man, that reminds me of Kiss. I want to rock and roll all night, right? And you just like, but he found a way to incorporate that voice into his writing, and no one else does it. So he's great. Kid's a beast.
That's awesome. And one thing,
keep going, man. I'm here for you. I'm here for you.
One thing that we always try to tell the kids too is, say something that's been said a million times in the most unique way possible. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of songs about heartbreak. There's a lot of songs about relationships gone bad. But then John Mayer says we're slow dancing in a burning room. Like what a cool way to say that everybody can relate to.
Yeah, man. I mean, I wrote a song with a 17-year-old artist named James T.W. called "When You Love Someone," right? And this song is probably the song I've gotten the most reaction of out of my career. And what's interesting about this song is just, it's a song about parents basically telling their kid they're splitting up, they're divorcing, and trying to give their kid some semblance of a pep talk. And the perspective on it is awesome. It's a really badass song. And what's interesting about it is I hadn't really heard the song the way we did it. It was a really interesting, the payoff is interesting. And, I'm very proud of it, because it's an interesting topic to try to navigate and not do it in Nashville, right? You say, oh, it feels like something Nashville, but this wasn't Nashville. This is a British pop singer. But the way it's navigated, I felt was great. And these things probably have 400 million streams. It's a big song. And every time I hear it, it's like a lump in the throat. Like I feel the song. It's just like, it's not a fun listen, but I really believe that we took something, a topic he wanted to chase, and we found a way to really flip it on the axis a little bit. And I think that's the key to songwriting. If you want to write something with emotional depth, I think you always, like what LVO said, man, you know, like don't write it the same way that somebody else did. Write your own movie, twist it. You know, it's those twists that make us love records, you know?
You guys should absolutely listen to that song. I'll never forget my brother is the one that told me about that song because he went through a very nasty divorce and we were both in tears, dude. It is an incredible song. So props.
I wrote it on the night my dad was going in hospice, and I had to fly back to New York to say goodbye to my dad. And I lost my mom 2 years before, and then my dad. And so I was in sort of a fragile place, and you know, this chippy little 17-year-old British kid, this cute little kid, he's so sweet. And he's like, oh, I'd like to write this song about it, you know, and it came to him because he, once again, about finding your inner muse, right? He's giving a guitar lesson, and a kid told him that he had that conversation with his parents. And this kid at 17 giving guitar lessons figured this out as an idea and said, you know, there's a song here. This would really, I think people would resonate with people. Who says that at 17? So I was like, all right, this kid's pretty impressive. So when we're chasing it, what's interesting is there's no real emotional resolve in the song. You would expect the song to have a bridge where it's going to be better, everything's going to get better, everything's better, but it doesn't really happen. The song stays sad. And that's my fault because I was in such a pit in myself when we were writing this because I knew I had to run to the airport afterwards and fly back to like the hardest day of my life. So it was, I think there's just so many layers of emotion in that song. You kind of feel it. It's weighty, you know, and means a lot to me. I don't get to write that stuff often. I really, you know, I like writing happy stuff. The music that I feel is always up tempo and really poppy and happy because it just balances my psyche. It sort of it makes me want to wake up in the morning, you know? So that's what guides me is just, you know, chase your thing, you know, like I've written 2 ballads in my life that worked. And I'm very proud of both of them, but it's not what I do. I love writing up-tempo stuff. I love tempo and feel. So it's from all those disco records. Very good.
Sam, is the Apple Music playlist, is that the chorus of the James Clear song?
What'd you say?
The Apple playlist that you've got.
It's on there, I think. Yeah.
You mind if I play really quick for them? Just
sure. Yeah. Sure.
If I can find it here. There it is.
Don't make sense, but nevertheless, you gotta believe us. It's all for the best. It don't make sense the way things go. Son, you should know. Sometimes moms and dads fall out of love. Sometimes 2 homes are better than one. Some things you can't tell your sister cause she's still too young. Yeah, you'll understand.
That's brilliant. So good.
That's a peppy little tune for you.
Yeah.
You want to like dance around the room. Oh, this is fun.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I don't even see where you're coming from. I'm looking.
Vinny.
Oh, right here, Vinny Basile.
Oh, there you go. Hey, man. Hey, Vinny.
Hey, I'm a Camp Rockstar instructor.
Awesome.
I was wondering, have you ever really battled with self-criticism when you write? You know, you write something, you're just like, oh, it's just, I hate that. You know, I can't do anything that seems to be good. Or do you ever have that experience?
Well, I will tell you something. You know, I'm not a kid, and there are many times, like, I've never been the sexiest writer in the room. And what I mean by that is when I started out, a lot of the people I competed against were ex-artists who were coming off of maybe a few hits as a solo artist or in bands, and then they began writing songs. They have an immediate advantage over me. You know, like a guy like LVO, hey, he's in Daughtry, like he has a calling card that I wouldn't have had. So I was sort of, like I said, I've always had this outsider mentality because no one wanted to see me on a stage. You all see what I look like. No one needs to see me in front of a curtain. So for me, I always had the chip on my shoulder, but all the insecurities that come with it. And what happens with that is, there's so much self-loathing artistically that I go through these waves, and there'll always be a new writer who comes along that the world is so excited and enthralled with, and that writer might be 23, and I could be that kid's dad. And it's an intense feeling because, you start to wrestle with your craft, and I deal with it all the time. I just, when I hit those walls, I just power through it, and I just keep reminding myself that I'm dope. And I'm just like, wait, you're dope. You're kind of dope. And you just have to keep telling yourself, because honestly, you all are. The reality is we all are. We're all pretty good. Like we all figure this out. We all we're all pretty good at our thing. And what happens with that is it's so important for you to remember that, because there's this is psychological warfare, because you're trying to make art. You're trying to make art that might resonate. And you're trying to make art that might connect to people. And there's other people doing it at the exact same second. And you're trying to get the same fans that they might get. And so you're trying to stand out, and it all plays with your mind. And what you have to always tell yourself and remind yourself is, you know what? I'm pretty dope. And at the end of the day, like, I'll get better, but I'm pretty good. And if you know that in yourself, and I know you all know that, because the fact that you're even doing this class tells me that you all sort of are aware, you're identifying something in yourself, a passion, and you go, you know what? I think like my passion's pretty good. I think I kind of get this. And when you never ever, you gotta power through those things, but just know, like, we all go through it. I go through it once a week. Imagine trying to manage me in this level of crazy. I have a manager who walks Hollywood with me. We do a 5-mile loop. We do it 3 days a week just so he can talk me off the edge creatively. Because every day I'm like, no, I suck. It's over. My moment's gone. I'm so 2019. But you push through it and you figure it out, and that's the key.
Yeah, yeah. I guess we are our own biggest enemy, I suppose.
For sure.
Oh, look, I am by far my biggest hater. My kid too. My kid's kind of a hater too. But I really, I beat myself up. But the reality is, but then when it works and things go well, I'm like, also, you know what I mean? Like, so give yourself a break and just don't beat yourself too hard, because you're going to figure this out. You all will. Let me tell you something. If I figured it out, I'm no genius. If I figure this out, y'all figure it out.
Well, it's really important to just be able to relate, just to be vulnerable in that sense. We all can relate. Be like, hey, we all go through this. We all know this. So and it's empowering. It's good to be able to share that.
It's very real, and you have to understand, like, I've never had a moment, even when things are great and things are just magical, and I feel like I'm living in like a dream world. Man, I wake up the next day and I'm like, it's over. It's over. Well, I cannot believe I just laid that down. I just wrote the wackest thing I've ever written. I can tell I'm no longer, oh, wait. And I'll listen to whatever's happening that week on Spotify or whatever. And I'm like, wait, these people don't sound like me. They don't write like me. This is weird. This music's weird. I don't get it. This is weird. They have these like little sounds in every song, and they have these finger snaps in every song, and every song has a finger snap. Why does every song have a finger snap? I don't want to hear finger snap. Why are all these songs, why do they all have trap beats? I don't want to hear a trap beat. I like songs at 180 BPM, not halftime. I hate halftime. Why is everything halftime? So you go through all this, and you just like, but once again, you fight through it.
I got a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm Mike, father of a rock star drummer.
Hey, man.
I've done some writing. It's a weird science that we do, wherein your art is success based on its judgment of other people. Have you ever had something that you felt in your heart was just an absolute home run and nobody else agreed with you? And second question, what's your go-to instrument when you write songs?
Two great questions. I'm going to tell you, I wrote a song with Rivers Cuomo from Weezer on Super Bowl Sunday this year. I missed the pregame to write this song in his house. And I was so excited about this song. I was so excited. I drove back like screaming into the phone with my manager. I was like, best Weezer song in 10 years. I was like, this is it. This is it. This is it. This is it. And I delivered the song, and Rivers was like, I love it. And everybody else in the committee went silent on me. Nobody responded. To date, zero. No one passed. They just didn't respond, which is the harshest thing in the world, because that means they thought it sucked. You know, it's one thing you get if they don't even respond, they're like, ooh, you know. And I was so salty about it, and I kept listening back. And the crazy thing is, I still listen back. I'm like, best Weezer song in 10 years, and it's just sitting on my hard drive. It sucks. Sorry, what was the other part of the question?
What's your go-to instrument when you write, or do you have one?
You know, I mean, with guitar, what happened is I could do a little kumbaya guitar. So what I do is I use the guitar as sort of just a melodic centerpiece. Just I do a little sort of just basic strumming, and and I'll just surf around C, G, and D and E minor, and just sort of. But what I do is I'm doing that to find the rhythms of the words, because that's my writing is rhythmic in terms of I have a whole process that I'm trying to get to. It's a puzzle, but I love the way words bounce and the way words sort of hit quarterly. I'm a huge fan of where words land. To me, they're like these things that just parachute down, and I want them to be clever, and I want to jolt you at certain times. So you just go. So there's like almost like it's how Swedish writer, like I don't really take a Swedish approach, because that's extremely mathematical, and not to generalize, but there's a whole, if you research like Swedish songwriting, it's a very different sort of writing, because it's so melodically strong. It's so much better than our writing melodically. They just get it. They understand melodies like nobody in the world. But they write very scientifically, and there's a lot of counting of syllables and all these things. That's less my scene, but I'm a big fan of the notion of things have to make sense. Pre-chorus should never rob a chorus. I don't want a verse that ever sort of starts on an anticipation for the most part, because I really love ramping into a chorus, sort of doing a pickup into a chorus melodically, because that's to me, that's why I thought that worked when I heard it. I was like, oh, it just explodes into the chorus. I never want a chorus to come in on the one and or the two, because historically with me, that just doesn't really work. If you have the downbeat and the chorus comes in on the two, it's very rare for that to work. And so there's just like little things like that I'm always looking for. And did I answer that question? Kind of.
The answer was guitar.
Guitar as a means to an ends to get the words out of my system. Yes. Thank you. Thanks for you landed me. You landed the plane, my friend.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, I'm there.
Anybody else?
Question.
Yes.
Sure.
Out of all the songs you wrote, which one was the one that you had the hardest time coming up with?
Ooh,
We assuming like successful like hit songs?
Yeah.
Most of them have been really quick. The ones that worked for me tend to be pretty quick historically. I wrote a song with this kid, Banners, who I adore, a song called Someone to You. Any of you guys on TikTok right now? Are any of you guys into TikTok?
Probably all are.
You might know this song. This song's like real big on TikTok. It's called Someone to You, and I love this song. That one was interesting because I had a chorus, I think, that day when he came in, and we wrote this thing. But I remember it was this weird puzzle. We never really, like, I felt like it was so close to being perfect. I love this. First of all, it's a song that I love. Like it does all these things that I like. It's super up tempo. It's optimistic. I like the energy of it. It has like a longing to it. The melodies are pretty fierce, but there was just something imperfect about it. And it started in the demo. Like when we made the demo, I just felt like the demo was like I spend a lot of time on my demos. We spend tons of time. I have engineers and a programmer, and we sit there and beat demos into the ground because I want the demo to sound like a master. Even if I don't end up producing the song, I'll only end up producing about 10% of what I write. And I don't really want to produce it, but I want to know that if my demo sounds better than everybody else's demo, then at least it'll get heard. So I spent a lot of time beating the demo into the ground. The song could be written in 30 minutes, but then the demo that follows, I might spend a week on. And that song, I feel like we spent weeks on the Banner song, just going back to it, trying to figure out holes in it. And we got it to a place, I forgot the producer's name, a kid in Canada produced it. And I feel like he did a pretty good job. But it's one of those songs that always has been maybe slightly imperfect to me because we just never really dialed the entire thing in. And then it was one of these songs the label didn't care about. They threw it against a wall. Nothing happened. Then American Idol picked it up, and it was the theme for a season 2 years ago on American Idol. And I thought that was great. It was like a huge win. I was like, this is so exciting. And the song went away. And then somebody called me about 8 weeks ago, and they're like, that Banner song you did? I said, yeah. So it's streaming like 1 million streams a day. And I looked, and so right now it's at like 85 million. It'll be at 100 million in 2 weeks. And it's crazy because it was a song that I think people, like, never was on radio. You never heard it on your radio station, It just was like it was just a song that grew, but TikTok is driving it. And that's what I say, like, TikTok is so important right now, because if you just catch that zeitgeist moment, next thing you know, you're Arizona Zervis and you have a $10 million record deal. Who knew,
That's great.
Roxanne.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, obviously, we're in a weird time right now, and
Yeah.
give you a little backstory on these kids. Most of them are in bands that we put together at the academy, and then these bands showcase their talents and shows that we book for them, and then a lot of them go off and literally, we've got a band that plays once, twice a month during the hot season and get paid like $800 a gig.
Right.
Kids are out there, they're gigging, they're writing, they're doing stuff. Right now, obviously, we can't do that. So what we've been doing, Sam, is doing like each kid does his part at home, the Brady Bunch style videos. And my pitch to them is, it's all we have right now. The worst thing we can do, and I'd love to get your input on this, the worst thing we can do is be silent and stagnant, out of sight, out of mind. Like, let's, what do you think?
Yeah, it's funny because I agree with you. But I also find it equally frustrating, right? Because I see all my friends. I'll turn on my Instagram, go to my Instagram, and I look, and 10 of my friends are going live at the same time, doing the same bedroom show that I saw the night before, the night before, the night before, the night before. And it's interesting because I just think, look, like anything else, it's about figuring it out, right? Like my friend Taylor from the band Rooney, this kid has just figured it out. He does these, and I mean, I don't know how many people are watching, but I'm riveted when I watch him perform because he's playing every single instrument. And he, one by one, he's doing like pedals and loops and all that stuff, but he switches it up. And one night he'll do songs from Rooney, and other nights he'll do the step-by-step theme from TGIF or Full House theme, and he'll break it down and he'll do it exactly. Like, he'll nail every single bit of it. And he has all these vintage synths, and you're watching an artist really like shape his craft, and it's riveting, to be honest with you. Then I have friends who do the same. Hey, I'm gonna play you my one hit that you know very well for the 4,000th time, and I do it every night. Hard. I would say the biggest thing right now is out of box thinking, right? This is out of the box thinking. So there have to be ways that people are going to figure out doing Brady Bunch performances where it's actually riveting, where I'm engaged. And unfortunately, thank God for me, I do not have to get in front of anybody. So I don't have to wrestle with this because I wouldn't have any idea what to do. But I agree with you, LVO. You do have to stay relevant. I mean, the one thing you can do is you can stockpile songs, because, like, here's what I'm doing, right? I wrote my ass off like the end of last year, right? I wrote half a Jewel album. I wrote Walk the Moon, I have a song that I love with. I did this band Camino thing that I really dig. I did Def Leppard. I did Billy Idol. I did like all these strange things. And they're all going to come out at some point. So it's great. I did the work, and they're going to come out over this next year, which keeps me sort of my name out there. At the same time, I'm writing every single day during this. I haven't stopped, but I've decided what I'm going to do is I'm just writing a chorus every single day. I sit here and I write a chorus, and I do it like a card catalog at a library. I just file it away, and I'm just stockpiling, because the biggest mistake I think people can do right now is throw things out there, right? You think, oh, Spotify is a captive audience, right? Because people have nothing else to do, so they're just listening to Spotify. But the problem is there are more people putting songs on Spotify than ever before during this pandemic, times 50, right? So be smart with it. Like, just this is your chance to scheme it. Like, there's a band called Steely Dan, who are probably my favorite band of the 70s, right? Steely Dan were a studio band, right? They sat there and they would spend a year making an album. But the complexity of what they were doing in the writing and the productions and the playing, and they recut the guitar solo on Peg, this iconic guitar solo, but 10 guitarists came in and tried the solo before Jay Graydon got it. I mean, they ran through musicians. Some nights they bring in a whole band to track a song, and then fire the band that night and bring in an entire different band to come in and track it. Just, it's a chance with your art to, like, look, this is here's what's great about this weird pandemic, right? We're all prisoners to some extent of, like, our lives have been altered for a minute. It's not gonna be forever, but you know what? You gotta come out of this a step ahead. This is your chance to take a step ahead of somebody else who was complacent. By whatever it is, keep going. Do not sit paralyzed, like, oh, I have no inspiration. Of course you have inspiration. And also, don't write any songs that have the lyrics quarantine, 6 feet, chlorine bleach. Like, don't write songs with any of this stuff in it, because what you're doing is you're dating yourself as a creative. No one is ever going to want to hear a quarantine banger at the end of this. You're
Heard
not going
that,
to look
Alvio?
back in a year and be like, yo, I'm so stoked to hear that quarantine jam. That was the bomb. I loved it. It was about, like, isolating and, no Postmates delivery. No one wants
I'm
that.
gonna go kill myself now. So
Yeah, I mean, like, man, like, just you don't let that dictate your creative being, because I have friends who will remain nameless who send me demos of, like, we're all like, man, there's like a community, and there's an inner circle of friends that I have, and someone will send an artist who will remain nameless who's big. He'll send me his stuff. He's like, yo, I wrote 6 songs this week. I'm like, dope. And then the songs arrive, and every single one of them has a reference to this, and it's so on the nose, and I'm just like, oh, okay.
Alvio, you hearing this?
absolutely. So you know why they're all laughing when you said that?
What
So
was that? Did you write a quarantine banger?
I did not, but I did a challenge. Basically, when this whole thing started, I was like, okay, I want these kids to stay creative and off of video games. So I started this challenge, and it was basically you got to write at least 1 minute, something original with the word quarantine in it. Just not a full song, and not that I was going to pitch it to the industry, but to keep them creative. And dude, we ended up getting videos from like 65 kids all over the country just wanting to take part in the LVO's quarantine challenge. The news outlets picked it up. So thanks for raining on my parade, Sam. No, I'm just kidding.
That's what I do. They call me the Great Dampener. By the way, where is everybody located? Like, is everyone in the Rochester area, or are they all over the place?
Everybody's in Rochester here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Represent.
That's funny. I had something for you too. And
I don't even know your area code. It's like some area code 6 something.
585.
585. Represent. Yeah.
Anybody else got questions?
I got a question.
Yes, Matt.
All right, turn my mic down. There.
All right, so of course there's a bunch of different styles.
Go ahead.
Oh.
I thought Matt was asking a question. Go ahead, Max.
Oh, so of course there's a bunch of different styles of music. So if you were going from a project like of a rock tune with a rock band and you're going straight into a ballad, what would you do to get your mindset into what would you do to get your mindset into the area of writing new song lyrics for the ballad when you just come from the rock tune?
I would summon every bad breakup you've ever had in your life, and I'd summon every unrequited feeling you ever had in a relationship. And I would do anything that sometimes you have to access things. Like some days I have really happy days, man. Like the day is good. I'm on like my pool float out back. I'm chilling, right? I got Stevie Wonder on my system, chilling. And then someone will say, "Oh, you got to write with so-and-so tonight." And it's completely an opposite wiring. I have to write something dark, and I don't want to write something dark. So I sit down, I go into a space that's somewhat meditative, and I try to reflect on some moment in my life that hits those buttons. And then I go in the room and I write that song. And that's how I do it. I have to, and if I can't access it, then I think about a movie. I'll think about, hey, Kramer versus Kramer. That's a horrible story. So like movies that just that just gut things that just emotionally just gut me, because I have to get to that place. And if I can't get there naturally, it's like a steroid. It's like, when all those baseball players are shooting steroids in their arms, well, sometimes you need like an emotional steroid. Sometimes you're really down and you're forced to write something peppy. So you know what? You gotta summon those emotions inside of you of, okay, what was something that I just loved? Let me get to that place again. Oh, that summer, that was the best summer in Fire Island of my life. Oh my God. We had so much fun. I remember this. Oh man, I remember like the emotional resonance of it. It just like still sits inside of me, and I still remember parts of sitting on that porch listening to that shitty cover band play bad Van Morrison covers. Let me get back to that place, and then that's how I'm gonna write it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Max, did that do it? I don't know if that did it.
Yeah, that was good.
All right.
Matt Stevens.
Yeah. Sorry, I had my mic turned on before. That's what was weird. Most of what we're doing here with the Academy stuff and the bands that we've put together, a lot of it is doing, being a shitty cover band, like you just said. But trying to find, I think the best way we can encourage these young songwriters in that sense, at least from my perspective, is using those cover band experiences and using that wealth of knowledge of classic or what's been considered great songwriting in the past, and kind of drawing off that for inspiration. Do you find yourself doing that from time to time, or even, I know you talked about newer, like where the scene's going and stuff like that, but you found yourself drawing inspiration off of classic songwriters to get that kind of drive going at all?
Matthew, I am like a big heaping bowl of gumbo. And in that gumbo is 70 years of music nerddom. So it doesn't matter what I'm writing. I'm summoning things from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s of every genre. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm so nerdy with this stuff. I'm such a weird collector kid. I used to, thousands of albums. I was a flea market kid. I bought records 10 cents a piece, 20% a piece, 25% a piece at the 6th Avenue Flea Market in Manhattan. And I had thousands of albums. I collected them like baseball cards. So I would read the back, I would study them in every genre. So it didn't matter what it was. It could be Boogaloo from the Bronx. It could be, anything from Florida disco to literally like IRS records, early, alternative. Like I just studied all of it, and I still mine all of it in my writing. I think it's the thing that separates me from a lot of writers is I'm not held to one era. I'm able to pull from different things. The number one thing is, of course, playing cover bands. You know who make great songwriters? People who did jingles. Because people who do jingles and commercials learn how to copy a popular song, and they figure out the DNA of the song, right? So jingles, when you listen to a lot of jingles, they're sound-alikes of like other songs. Like when Hand Clap hit, I got to tell you, I heard 30 commercials that sounded like Hand Clap, where they bid our thing, this or that, and they sort of figured out a way to do it. All those guys can end up being really good writers, because if you can break down a song to the DNA of the song, and that's what cover bands do, when you understand, when you're playing those parts and you understand why a song works, it will affect your writing. And it doesn't matter what genre, you'll be able to pull from something. And if you have that ability to pull that one thing, like I'll give you a perfect example, right? You know the You Get What You Give, New Radicals, Greg Alexander, Rick Knowles, right? That song has like these Todd Rundgren chords in it, you know? And what's so badass about that is when I first heard that song, it pulled from all this early 70s stuff in a way. It was modernized, but I'd never heard anybody do that. I thought that was so rad. And I think it blew people away. I mean, this is probably the best song in the 90s, but the reason was it just melodically was so much sharper. It was like everybody was doing one thing, and this thing's pulling from like Todd Rundgren, like I Saw the Light, 1973, you know? Brilliant.
I had a question, man, actually pertaining to that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So do you find yourself sometimes limited by the times that, like the time period that you're writing in?
Like
in the sense
as opposed to like right now?
Yeah. Like, I just read an article basically about the lack of melody in today's music. And it's like mathematically proven that it's just, music today, like melody is just not what it was. And harmonically with chord structures, do you feel limited?
Johnny, I have to tell you something. I'm just going to interrupt you. Like, this is probably my number one talking point all day long. And I feel brutalized because I didn't come up in an era that was as chordally adept. And I mean, like when I'm referencing disco records and Philly International, all this stuff to you, I mean the sophistication of those chords. When I'm talking about Todd Rundgren and all that stuff, those sevenths and ninths, all these really interesting chords, that's what I want to write to, because that, to me, those are certain chords. Like, do you guys know who Rex Orange County is? Right? Loving is easy. You know that song?
Maybe.
Think about those chords. Like those chords are so badass. They sound different, right? There's like a warmth to them where they don't sound like anything current. They're retro, but there's a sophistication to them. Like so few records do that. And what's so sad is right now, I feel like hip hop records take more chances than pop records. Hip hop at least tries things. The rules are way looser.
Yeah.
Rock, like the reason why rock is dead is like at the end of the day, like people stopped taking chances. Rock got so safe and radio plays safe rock, right? Well, it's the same with every genre, like house music, compare disco to house. Disco is so chordally sophisticated and house isn't. House is just repetitive. And so as far as the melodic shifts, what I've done is, to balance what you're saying about melodically, I read all the same articles, and I'll sit if I'm writing with a writer who's under 25 or so, they'll fight me because my instinct is I want melodies to soar. I want melodies to go blah, and they don't want that. But I believe in my heart always that what I've learned to do to counterbalance it, my give and take is I write really rhythmic verses that are somewhat static, so the chorus has a payoff. Because it's hard to fight me if my rhythm, if I'm writing in like a 3-note sort of box here on the verse, then I can make an argument that it's going to need a tension release for that chorus. But that's the only way that I get away with it. Other than that, like people would smack me because they want these melodies that just sort of do this nursery rhyme bullshit all the way through. I would say some of it is great. And it's like, I mean, I referenced that Roxanne song. That song was the best song of the summer. I love that song, But for every Roxanne, there's 50 that aren't as strong, that I just feel like are just riding one thing, and it's sort of hacky. So it makes me crazy and so it's just so you know, I have my own programmer, my kid Grant Michaels, representing Buffalo, New York. And Grant is with me 6 days a week. And the assignments I give him are, I give him a musical library of stuff to listen to that is so sort of quarterly out there to his frame of reference. It's Bacharach chords, stuff like that, but I want him to learn that stuff and pull from that and just give me little work tapes of just piano, beat, and fun chords. And let me do my thing off of that and try to modernize off of that, because when it works, I usually can sneak through with something that is at least subversive to me that works, because I don't feel like I'm just writing something that's so just sort of boring and derivative.
Yeah, I know. Actually, Elvie and I were talking about the other night. The real, for us, like the real genius writers are the ones like like a Brian Wilson or like Stevie Wonder. That song "If You Leave Me Now" by Chicago, like those chords, like they're so, if you actually break them down, they're so sophisticated, especially Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson's doing it like he's just tossing out like it's nothing. But the melody and stuff over top of it's still so pop. That's
Well,
so.
that's the thing. And that's the great challenge, which is why I love it. I love when I'm handed something that's so quarterly adept and I have to make it work.
Yeah.
Because it's a puzzle, but you just know it's going to be dope, because if you could figure that out, you just know it's going to sound more interesting than what other people are hearing. And that's what that Lovin' Is Easy stuff. That song is wicked. Like the first time I heard that, I was like, oh, this kid gets it. This is really deep, because he's mining some old stuff, but it's completely current. Everything on it is really smart. It's so simple. It's a nursery rhyme, but the way it's executed is brilliant.
That was Stevie Wonder. I mean, if you break down, like even a song like "You Are the Sunshine of My Life," it just sounds so nursery rhyme. That's straight up jazz. You take the lyrics and the melody away, Stevie Wonder was straight up jazz. And those.
I mean, have you guys know Sunday Best by Surfaces? Right? Think about that song, man. That song, basically, the bed of that track feels like "If You Really Love Me" by Stevie Wonder. And so he pulled from something as a reference point and then figured out a way to make it completely current. And so those guys figured out a way to make it completely current and interesting. And that's probably the best song in the top 40 right now for me. I like that. I like Super Lonely. Super Lonely is a dope song because it really does all this really, like rhythmically, it's really dope. The track is like straight up disco. The chords are kind of interesting. I don't know. There's really good stuff out there, but I would say it's the ones that take the chances are the ones that interest me.
Funny, Sam. Chris and I were having, I'll never forget this. We were having dinner with Tedder one night. We were in France touring and they were playing. And Ryan said the same thing you said. He's like, I recycle hits from the 80s all the time. Like, that's my thing, because I love doing that. I take a hit song and I pull from it and manipulate it and make it my own. And
yeah, I mean, it's like we're not ripping off. It's about inspiration, but it's like where you're finding inspiration in things. And then, for me, that's how I can get up in the morning as a creative is when I feel like I'm just like, I feel like I have a flea market vendor mentality of writing in terms of I'm just pulling these records and I'm like, oh, I love the way these horns worked there. It's like, what Mark Ronson does, right? He's curating all these interesting, he's making sonic palettes of all these records that he really dug, but then the top line on top of it's like a completely different animal. So
Sam, you've been extremely gracious with your time. It's been like an hour and 40 minutes. Take a couple more.
Man of the people.
No more questions. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Who said that?
Adele.
Adele. Go ahead.
Hi. So for pop music, where is like the best place to live, kind of?
Well, here's the thing. It's LA without even a question. And I hate saying that because I really believe in my heart. I'm not a joiner. I never joined anything in my life, right? I'm not a joiner. I joined the football team. I told you that. That sucked. It didn't work out for me. I'm not a joiner, right? So I hate the notion. Like I moved to LA because honestly, I wanted to sit in the sun because I'm from New York. And as you guys know with the weather patterns, it didn't really work for me anymore. I woke up one day, my daughter was like 4. I was walking across the street in Greenwich Village and a snowdrift hit us. And she started kicking my knee really hard. She was 4 years old. And this little chick is like kicking my knee. And I was like, what? And she's like, I hate it here. I was like, all right. and that was it. I really was done. So we moved to LA, and I moved to LA. I didn't move to LA as a writer. I moved to LA as a human because I just wanted, this was like a dream for me. I wanted to live like the Randy Newman lifestyle. You know, I wanted to drive and go to the beach and do fun things that I'd never done in my life. LA as a young pop writer is the Mecca. The reason it is the Mecca is because the entire industry, the industry has shifted out of Manhattan, as you guys know. It's just really, it's Nashville and LA. And I would recommend rock, like really for what I do, I kind of belong in Nashville more than here, but I think really rock and country are there. And I think pop is here. And there is spillover, and those worlds are very blurry right now, as you know. You know, Halsey will jump on Kelsey Ballerini, things like that. Like it's very loose. But what I would say is LA, it's a great time to be young in LA as a writer because it is a very creative city. And there's so many people writing on any given day. And once you get in the mix, like it's so social. And if that's your thing and you like meeting people, like people are out writing every single day in configurations. And you know, it becomes like this weird extended family. So I highly would recommend LA over anywhere else. I'd also recommend London because I think London always just is a step ahead of us. It's more interesting musically. So if you can make your way to London, I think their pop is always just a little doper, but that's my own taste.
Thank you.
No problem.
That's a good point, Sam, because like, you know, there's the it's easy to follow what's hip right now.
Yeah.
Writing. What's hip right now was written how long ago? A year at least? By the time the song's written and the record actually hits the radio, that
100%.
That song's old. So the last thing you should do is
100%.
go to the radio now and try to do that. Do something else.
Do you guys know the song Make You Mine by Public? Anybody?
Yeah.
Yep. It's a good song.
Yeah, so that song was written and released in 2014. It's 6 years old. It has just become a hit. I just worked with those guys. They're awesome. The song is 6 years old, you know? I mean, how crazy is that, you know? Don't ever feel panic about that. The best song wins, and it will get heard in time if it's meant to get heard.
You know that song Try from Pink? That song was written years before that by Busby, God rest his soul. But he wrote that for himself. And then,
I didn't even know that it was an old song. Wow. I knew it was Busby. I didn't know it was an old song. Crazy.
Song, and it was so dope. It was amazing. Even his version was great. And then people passed on it. I can't remember who they pitched it to originally. It might have been like Kelly Clarkson or somebody. They all passed on it, and then Pink made it a hit.
That's crazy.
It's the
crazy.
song for the right artist for the right time.
That's right.
Any other questions? We don't want to take up his
I
entire.
have one.
Morgan.
Hi.
Hi.
I feel special because I'm in here now.
First of all, you made the cut. Second of all, you have a very dark backdropping. And third of all, I like that it says Morgan.
Thank you. I formerly was a Camp Rockstar performer. So, but what, as a songwriter, what inspires you to actually like write music? Because I am struggling on that.
You know, for me, what excites me is because I work title out, it's when I like have a title that really feels like, the first thing I do is I come up with a title. It'll hit me, whatever. Then I go to Spotify and I see if that title exists. And I'd say 7 times out of 10, it doesn't exist. If it does exist, I'm hoping that it's by somebody who has less than 1,000 plays with the little arrow next to it, you know? So then I'm like, all right, so it's free reign. But when I have a title that's sort of mine and I feel like I feel a weird ownership of it. It's almost, I feel like I've trademarked the title before I've even written the song. Jesus, how about this light on me? I'm like, I'm very scary right now. But when I'm just trying to navigate this. I'm sorry, man. It's LA sunshine. You know, it's very suffocating.
Good.
When I find a title that I have this innate ownership of, the first thing I do with it is I get giddy because I'm like, okay, I have it. now what is the story? What's the payoff? What's the puzzle? And usually what I do is the first melody that I scat down usually ends up being the genesis of what I end up using. But I think when I have a title that I'm geeked on, everything changed. I get so excited, and that fuels me for a whole day. Like I'll say it over and over, and I'll work it into my speech to my pep talks to myself all day long, and eventually I figure it out.
That's awesome information. Thank you so much.
All right, later, Morgan iPhone.
That's an interesting. That's an interesting concept because I'll bet you that most of you have never thought about writing a song starting with the title first, right? As young writers, we have this pressure of I got to come up with a verse, I got to come up with the melody, I got to come up with the chords, I got to come up with all the lyrics. No, you don't. Work with each other, collaborate. How often in pop music, Sam, is one guy writing the entire song?
I mean, not only does it not happen, but honestly, I don't want to write an entire song. Like, I think collaboration is awesome. And collaboration goes back to the dawn of songwriting, right? It goes back to Tin Pan Alley and all this other stuff. I mean, people have always collaborated. To me, collaboration is sort of at the forefront of everything I believe in, because if, like, you know, man, you bring chocolate and peanut butter together,
yes,
you get like Twix or whatever the hell it is, right? Like, you have like these magic combinations, like they're like, I mess with Lennon and McCartney, but I really like Lennon and McCartney as a brand. You know, I like the thing. I like a thing when two people sort of, even if one, like, and you might collaborate with somebody where somebody's super heavy-handed and sort of drives the ship, and maybe you get a few zingers in, and maybe there's an alpha presence and you're not the alpha presence, and maybe that person is really driving the ship. But you know what? At the end of the day, you can take ownership if you're a part of the song and you did something and it's part of the collaboration. And then the next day that might shift and you write with the next person and you're completely driving it and they're passive to some extent, but they bring a couple things. But those couple of things, they mean so much, and that's what I would say. I once met this guy. It's a production duo who were in Boston who used to produce records, who were real big for a minute. And I was talking to him and I asked him about his partner because they weren't working together anymore. I said, I got a sense that this guy was really on top of his game. So I said, well, what'd the partner do in the dynamic? What was his thing? And he said, he didn't play any instruments. He didn't write. He wasn't really musical, but he would pace around the room when we recorded. And he would walk around and he would come up to me once during every session and whisper something in my ear. But that one thing he whispered altered the song completely and made it work. It's like he was the puzzle solver, but he wasn't musical and wasn't doing anything engineering or technical. He really did nothing. But yet what he brought was that in sort of weird intangible that like made it like effortless, and he felt that it was a 50-50 partnership on that alone. Collaboration takes many different shapes and forms, but it's really about the end product and how you feel about it.
All right, we'll take two more and then we're gonna let them go. I know, Dave, you got a question, right? Matt's now.
Yeah, hi Sam, how are you? So it's
I see.
signed
I'm
in
looking
as
for the
Matt.
window. Hey, Matt. Hey, Matt.
But I'm not Matt. I'm Dave. Matt's dad. But I
Hey,
was
Dad.
so this morning. Alvio posted something about a Police album, Synchronicity. So during my workout, I put on some Police music, and it struck me that there was a lot of music that reflected the Cold War era. And I was just surprised to hear you say that you don't think that anybody should write songs about quarantine, but doesn't popular music reflect public opinion? And don't you think that wartime certainly plays a big role in just a lot of interesting music, like Ohio and War Pigs?
I'm a big fan of protest music historically. Like Ohio's a great record. I think it struck. The problem is I don't know what we're really protesting right now in quarantine. We're just sort of all in something and there are buzzwords with it. You know what I mean? Like if this was a wartime, I'm a big fan of musical activism, of whatever your take is. Like I love it. I mean, honestly, some of the greatest records ever. I'm a big Sly and the Family Stone guy. They're very politically charged records, you know? But what I would say about the quarantine thing that's a little tricky is we're about only a month and a half into something, and I don't really know what perspective people would want to hear. You know, I mean, I look at this is my own bias. I turn on the TV every night and I see these commercials, and they all have like the Brady Bunch squares, and there are all these feel good commercials, and it's we're all in this together, we're all in this together, we're all in this together, we're all in this together. There's like a little bit of fatigue with we're all in this together for me. Like, we are all in this together. I get it. The flip side is, you know what? Like, I have to live with my like 14-year-old kid who's losing her mind. So I don't want to write a song about it though. I just think no one wants to hear a song about my 14-year-old kid losing her mind in quarantine. I think people want the same themes and by the way, I'm speaking about pop music and, you know, specifically. And people like themes of optimism. I think they like talking about relationships and real life things. And I think anything like that will always stay timeless. My fear, I'll give you a perfect example, right? September 11th. I lived through September 11th. I lived at 10th and Broadway. I saw the towers go down right in front of my face. One thing I would say about it is when I think back to September 11th and the song of September 11th, I would say it's probably Nora Jones's Don't Know Why. That was the record that had the biggest spike from September 11th and then went on to sweep all the Grammys. And what's interesting about the Nora Jones record is it's not really on the nose. She's not talking about towers going down. She's not talking about, it's really a song. It's just, you know, it's a song that's a little bit, I guess, a little bit nebulous to some extent, but you can find the meaning in it that you want. What I'm saying is just don't write on the nose. If like, if you're summoning an emotion right now from this, that's awesome. And if it inspires you to write something, that's awesome. But if you're really going to write things that are so indicative of quarantine, 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 you know, my love is in quarantine, I just feel like in a year people might not be stoked. But I could be wrong.
Makes complete sense. Sam, one of the girls that submitted a song for that challenge, she didn't use the word quarantine, but she's a senior in high school, so she had a lot to say.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like that's a real story, but I think the way I just think the way it's these are puzzles. Remember, you want to write timelessly. You just I think sometimes when you want to write a song, you want to sit down, you want to access whatever emotion you're feeling, but think long game and think, wow, is this something that is going to stand the test of time? Why will this stand the test of time? Or is it just something impulsive, that a rant that I feel like making a rant right now because I'm frustrated? Two different kinds of songs.
Sam,
Neither is wrong.
Elvia, is that person of whom you are referring to, does that happen to be Chloe Shusky?
Yes. Yeah. That was really good.
Yeah.
Well, Sam, I think I speak on behalf of everybody. You've been incredible. And the fact that everybody is still here watching is a testament to how engaging this was. And I can't thank you enough. And
Hey, thank you for having me. I just want to say, whatever age you are, I'm looking around, I'm trying to guess the ages, and I would assume some of you are as young as about 13 or 14. That's my kid's age, and it doesn't matter what age, you can be 100. The reality is everybody can do this, and there will be naysayers along the way, and there will be people who try to sort of get in your head that, you know, this is impenetrable and you will not be able to do this with your life and it's unrealistic. And that's bullshit. Anybody can do this. And the reality is it's all about the work that you put into it. And I put 1,000 years into this, man. I worked so hard and I felt like I really did outwork out loud. I'm a Survivor guy. I'm sorry, I'm not wearing my Survivor tribal buff. I usually wear it. That's my mask I've been wearing outside in the street. I have a tribal buff. And the tribe has spoken. And what the tribe is telling you right now is anybody can do this in terms of you get better, you get better, you get better. And never, ever doubt yourself to that extent. And never let anybody doubt you. I remember a story I read about, I'm going to leave you guys with this, about Khalid, the kid Khalid, you know, the singer. And I guess he sang at his high school at I guess he put out a mixtape about 5 years ago or 4 years ago before the American Teen record. What was the American? What's it called? American what? American Dream.
American Teen.
Hi, that's American Teen record, right? Right before that came out, he put out like a mixtape locally in Texas, and he went to a high school basketball game. He's a senior in high school, and all the kids in the stands from the team started chanting, "Khalid sucks," you know. Now imagine you're a high school senior, you put out like this mixtape and like locally for your friends, and the other entire stands is chanting that you suck. You're not even a player on the court. He's not an athlete. He was a kid in the stands on the other side, and he's getting taunted. The reality is there are going to be those guys, those voices, you will hear those your whole life. Never listen to any of them. You're better than anybody knows you are, and you will figure this out, and you will join me in California for a high five. All right?
Sam, thank you so much.
All right, man. I love you, buddy. I'll see you soon. All right?
Thank you so much, Sam.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.
Take care, yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
That was awesome.
Super cool.
That was great.
Thanks.